tonight's program, Ellen McHale, right? Get your name? is going to present Writing Our Own Stories, I think, or recording your family history. And I told her, finally I got you here for 2 years. I wanted this woman to come and do a program, so I'm really looking forward to this. So anyway, we'll welcome Ellen right now, and then after we're going to do a short meeting. I'm going to pass this around. Thank you. Ellen, please come. Thank you for coming tonight. And she shared with me that she's already done a drive-around with Burn, the historical site. They saw the paper that she was going to do in Duanesburg, so they asked her to come to them. So she does a little
practice session.
Good. Well, welcome.
So hi, my name's Ellen McHale. As my job, I run an organization called New York Folklore. We're statewide. I've been there 25 years, and so I've done a lot of interviewing as part of that job. And I'll talk a little bit about the things that we do, New York Folklore does, at the end, but that's not really why I'm here today. My goal today is to get you comfortable, I guess, with interviewing, thinking about how you would do it and how you might approach it. And it's a wonderful week to do it because Thanksgiving's this week and we're all gathering with family. And I know as a child, that was the time that I heard a lot of stories around my parents' kitchen table. And there were people in my family that were known to be the talkers. And I remember being one of the folks who stayed behind when my sisters and brothers left to listen to the stories. So this is a great time of year to think about interviewing your family relatives. So George Bernard Shaw says, a man is like a phonograph with half a dozen records. So basically he's saying we tend to repeat ourselves. Stories tend to be told more than once. And as a folklorist, we know that in the telling of the story, it gets shaped, it gets perfected, and so the story might be one shape when it starts being a story, and then as somebody tells it and realizes that certain parts of the story get more interest than other parts, those stories get to be shaped. So you never have a story that's just unrehearsed, or there may be one time it's told, but then it's going to be told again and again. So I'm going to have you guys start, and so I want you to find an object in your possession. It can be something on your phone if you don't have anything with you today. And I want you to find a partner. If you're a couple, maybe it's better to be partnered with them, but you can if you want to. So I want you to give that object to your partner and have that person look at it for a couple minutes. Think about some questions they might ask, but then I don't want you to ask the questions, but I want you to think about what do you see, what do you think about it, and is there anything you'd like to ask? And then the owner of the object will get to talk for 2 minutes, so not long, 2 minutes about that object, telling you, as the listener, who's just listening, because that's a skill, just listening about that object, and then I want you to switch. So can we take 5 minutes maybe and do a little object sharing? Anything you have in your possession, it can be a pen, it can be a coin, it can be a picture on your phone, anything that you might have with you. And we'll take just a few minutes, but I want you to experience both being the interviewer and the interviewee.
This is my digital phone.
Interviewer and the interviewee.
This is my digital recorder. I was inspired to get a digital recorder
To your partner.
from Norm Collins. Norm Collins, who's since passed away.
I remember Norm.
And he was the vice president of the Historical Society. He put all the programs together. And he had a digital recorder, and he was showing it to me one time. And he would go around and record people who he thought were interesting to talk to, just to have that as a record. Because once they're gone, they're gone. So I had used this digital recorder to record Norm Collins, and I have a short recording of him from back in 2011 when we were at Duanesburg days. And this lady here was speaking with Norm Collins, asking questions, and I was making a recording using this recorder. So I use this for the Historical Society.
You got Norm on there?
Not on here now, but I have the file at home.
Okay.
It's like any recording device. It gets filled up with so much stuff there, and then I'm coming along and like, I only have so many minutes. Right now it has 4 hours and 27 minutes worth of time on it, and it's counting down as we go right now.
To talk about
Are you timing 2 minutes?
I'm not timing 2 minutes, but I think my 2 minutes are off.
Okay.
If you have questions about this, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Yeah, so is that different, or well, it's obviously different, but is that better than recording it on phone? Because you can record.
At the time I got this, I don't think I even had a phone yet that you could do all that on. It's probably just as easy to do it on your phone. My phone, I don't record stuff to the cloud there, so my phone gets full of stuff. Then I have to put it on the computer. I'm not that tech savvy.
So this isn't directly about your object here, but Norm and his wife was always here too. And what was her name?
Frances. Fran. She went by Fran.
Okay. Certainly switch roles. So finish up and then let the other person have
So I can tell you about my phone or whatever, 2 minutes.
Sure.
So this phone, it's a smartphone. But there is an interesting story behind it, because I had a phone that I got. I used to, before I retired, I had a phone provided by my company, which was GE. So then when I retired, I had to get my own phone. And then, but that was with T-Mobile. And that didn't work a lot of places. So then I decided to go with Spectrum and then put the rest of the family on them. And I got this phone. It was a Samsung A51 5G. I was happy with it. I had no intention of getting a new phone. But so one of my hobbies is going caving. So there's a bunch of caves around here. So one of my caving friends wanted me to help him rig ropes to go down into a vertical cave out off of Likers Road, off Route 20. Anyway, so I said, normally I wouldn't take the phone caving with me because I don't want to damage it. I thought, well, I'm just going in the entrance to help him rig the ropes. So I thought, I'd like to take some pictures. So I had the phone in my pocket, right? And I leaned over, and in this entrance right, there's one pothole this big around, this deep. I leaned over, the phone fell out of my pocket into the pothole. I reached in as quick as I could. I got it out, checked. It's working fine. No problem. I said, well, because that wasn't one of those new waterproof phones.
So I'm going to bring it back if you guys are ready to stop.
Anyway, the rest of the story is 3 weeks later it quit working, and I had to buy this phone.
So I'm going to bring it back if you guys are ready to stop.
Anyway, the rest of the story is 3 weeks later it quit working, and I had to buy it.
So this is an exercise actually that
you're a caver, not a
person, I can't think of her name right now,
Cavers
who
Rescue
does a lot of
Sponsors.
work with teaching kids how to be ethnographers, how to be folklorists, or how to interview each other. So it's an activity that kids do. It's something I've done with high school age kids, not with really young kids. And often we ask kids to bring something from home, and then they can, it's kind of like glorified show and tell in lots of ways. But I'm not going to put you on the spot. We often ask kids to say what they learned, but I'd be curious to know who preferred being the interviewee, who preferred talking as opposed to who preferred listening. Anything that struck you is which role did you prefer? What do you prefer? Both? Yeah.
I'd say I like listening. Okay, I'm a better listener than a talker.
I did a good job of talking to my wife. I like both roles.
Did anybody find that they had questions that didn't get answered, that they wanted to keep going?
You answer my questions.
I know for myself, I much prefer being the one that poses the questions and not so much being the one that's on the spot. So it is an awkward feeling sometimes for me to be the one that's in the spotlight and being the one that's being questioned. But I think it's useful as somebody who does the questioning to realize how it kind of feels to be in the other seat. Because you can have some empathy for that person and feeling a little bit under the spotlight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about oral narrative, what we would call stories and storytelling. Narratives, stories are performances. You know, like we are telling a story, we are telling it to somebody. It's a performance. And one telling is a selective retelling of the past. So you can ask siblings in the same household about an event, and one will have experienced it one way, and one will have experienced another way. And that's one of the sort of criticisms of oral history is, it's not set down, it's not correct. But the reality is everybody perceives an event in a different way, and so that perception enters into whatever telling that you're going to hear from somebody. Recordings create a fixed record, but they don't tell us about that telling as the event itself. So you can record a story, but it really doesn't, unless you take notes and write down what happened at that event, the actual telling, that performance is really between the person who's speaking and the people who are listening. And so the teller is going to shape what they're saying because of the reaction of the audience or how they want to embellish it. Will really affect, it's a performance. And it's a conversation, but it's more than just a conversation. So as you're telling a story, you have to consider the setting. You know, where are we? What's happening in the current events of the time? When I do a lot of, I used to, I haven't done any recently, but I used to be a trainer for the Library of Congress's Veterans History Program. And I used to go to VFW halls and teach veterans how to interview each other, or Boy Scouts how to interview people in their communities. And what's happening in current events at that time will really affect how people, what they're focusing on in their stories, what they want to talk about. And you may not ever recognize that the story is any different than it was maybe a year ago when it was told. But really, because of the situation of that time and that place and that day, and who are they telling it to? Was it a Boy Scout or is it a fellow veteran? Will really change the shape of that story. So there's always a context for the telling, and there's always a relationship between the individuals who are telling and who are listening. Just like today, you have a relationship going on with somebody around you. So oral narratives, stories are always personal. Again, the present reminds us of the past. The decision of Dick Bauman, who's a social linguist, says that the decision to tell a story and the way that it's told is dynamic. It's an interaction with two individuals, and in the telling and in that interaction, there's a negotiation that happens. So he's saying that nothing's ever static. What is untold? What about a story is not being told? And that also invites us to think about what are the possibilities for other tellings. And it very much depends on who's listening. I know my grandmother. I tried to get her to tell about family histories for a long time. My father used to say to me, "Oh, you're a folklorist. You talk to people all the time. You need to interview your grandmother." And she passed away when she was 103, so she had a long life to tell about. She never wanted to be recorded, and she never wanted to tell me about her childhood, and that's because it was a difficult childhood. If it hadn't been me, maybe she would have told another peer, maybe somebody her own age or her sibling or somebody else who was a peer, but certainly the relationship of grandmother and granddaughter was not a comfortable one for her. So I kind of say that as a cautionary tale because people say, oh, you should talk to your relatives. You know, they're here and you need to interview them. And sometimes that's a really wonderful opportunity. And I've seen where you have parents, a mother-daughter, for example, who are really sitting down and really collecting the oral history of the mother in a really wonderful way. But then you also have times when your family doesn't really want to talk about something, and so that relationship isn't necessarily always possible. So if you want to collect a family story, start with yourself. Think about, what do you want to know? What is it about your family that you really want to dive into? And then you have to kind of think, it's not like scattershot. You really need to think, who are the actors who I want to speak to? Who would know that occasion? Who would be the person that I should talk to? And the first person that you should talk to is someone with whom you're comfortable. So find somebody who's a guinea pig, somebody who's willing to listen to you and be able to do that. That's my mother, by the way, and my uncle, who is 98. So he's somebody I should be listening to. And I did actually go interview him for the Veterans History Project. He was a World War II vet. He was in the Army Air Corps when he was 17. So I went to talk to him about his experiences of being in the Army Air Corps. And his wife said to me, oh, I'm so glad you're here, because I'm so tired of hearing his stories. So I did get a chance to record him, so that was good. But there were things he didn't want to tell me. And I'd say, how about that? And he'd say, well, we're not going to talk about that right now. So don't ever think you're going to get the whole story, because there will be things that people hold back, and it has to do with the relationship of the two individuals who are involved. So I'm going to run through this. But, oh yeah. So most story collecting actually happens not sitting down and talking to each other. Most happens in the context of other activities. Making food in the kitchen is when you hear a lot of stories. Around the supper table at Thanksgiving is a story opportunity. Doing something together in an activity. So sometimes that awkwardness of sitting down in a chair with somebody doesn't have to happen if you want to be collecting a family story. And I always think, who do you ask afterward? Who else has a good story? So as a folklorist, that's how I often work. I'll interview somebody about a topic in the community, and then I'll say at the end, so who else do you think I should talk to? And it's like a chain. And you can do the same thing with your family. Who else in your family is maybe another source of information? Be aware, though, as I said before, that your role has changed when you become the interviewer. You are now not the granddaughter or not the niece. You're somebody who's asking questions. The other family story I have is I was hired by the Delaware County Historical Society a long time ago to interview people who'd gone to one-room schoolhouses. They wanted to get an inventory of what it was like to go to a one-room schoolhouse. And I, following the advice I have that said, go to somebody you're comfortable with, I went to my uncle, who was from Roxbury, and I knew he'd gone to a one-room schoolhouse. And he said, oh yes, I'll let you talk to me. And we sat in chairs opposite each other, and he would not say anything. And I would say, so how was it, what was it like? What did you do? And he would get only so far, and he'd stop. And then the doorbell rang, and he was so relieved that we could stop this interview. And I found out later, I said something to my mother, and she said, oh, Ellen, he just hated school. He did not like school. He wasn't a good student. I don't think he finished school. So here I was thinking he was the person that I should speak to, and he was not. So my role as an interviewer was really muddied by my relationship to him as his niece also. But there's things you can do. One thing is props are really comfortable to have. So props meaning photo albums. If there's, I find that if there's a real difficulty in talking to somebody, often photos will really help because people can just go through a photo album and tell about the photos, and then they lose the fact that they're on the spot or under the headlamp or whatever. Again, use follow-up questions. Some of these are just normal things you would do if anybody was doing an interviewing. Use follow-up questions. Avoid those general, big global questions like, what was it like when you were growing up? I mean, that's too big, right? You need more specific questions. Realize that there'll be information that you won't get. People will hold back and not tell you things. And never record in secret. That's sort of an ethical, never do that. If somebody won't speak to you and you know they have a great history, you want to get that history, but it's too bad, but don't record in secret. If somebody tells you stories, maybe you go afterward and write it down, what you can remember, but never have a secret recorder. So I realized that I probably need to talk about technology because people use it today, and I'm not a technological person. So, but I have a couple things I can say. First of all, if you really want to record a family member, there's some really inexpensive digital recorders. This is not inexpensive, but you can get a Tascam recorder that looks a lot like this for like $120. So in the scheme of things, yeah, what is that, a Sony?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, just at someplace at Target or something, you can get a pretty inexpensive, and because it's digital, you don't have to worry about the workings of the insides. It's digital, so there's no, it's the technology really is your friend at that point. I was a very slow adapter. I used an audio cassette for years and years and years, but you know, you've got that that comes out in the recording. So these are pretty easy to use, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you don't want to buy a recorder and you don't have one, there's actually an app you can get for your telephone or your cell phone if you have a smartphone. It's called Audio Memos. It's 99 cents if you want to buy the expensive version. You also have a free version, but the Library of Congress says this is perfectly fine to use, and they recommend that you buy the 99-cent version. And you can record it on your phone. It works just like any other digital recorder, but it's your phone. We have at New York Folklore, we have folks who don't want to use anything that looks too scary, and so they want to use their phones. So we have what's called a vlog set up. So if you're kids make their own video logs that they put on TikTok, and you can buy a little vlog kit, which basically is a lavalier mic and a stand for your phone, and that's all you need. And I know the vlog set we have is like $100 for the microphone and the little standard for your phone. So the technology really has come a long way, and really helps you be able to do this successfully. If people have questions, please stop me, because I'm kind of just on a roll here. So there's, again, I'm a folklorist, so I think of oral history. Probably all historians don't think I do it very well because I'm not coming at it from that historical bent. But certainly we have a kindred, we share the same discipline in lots of ways, but we're not necessarily looking specifically at straight history. But there's lots of ways to tell a story. There's family expressions that often have a story behind them. We have in my own family, we have occasions when we've had a funny event, and then there's a saying, so everybody knows when you say that saying, we all remember that event that we shared together. So family expressions, customs, ways we celebrate are all part of your family folklore. You can tell stories with albums and photographs. People have studied how people put together a photo album and what's important to them, so it actually can tell a story in that way. Obviously personal written memoirs, genealogy, poetry, and cooking. And I brought that up because there's a great book by Diane Ty called Baking as Biography, A Life Story and Recipes. So she took her grandmother's recipe books, and she basically looked to see how it reflected her grandmother's life as a woman in the 19-teens. And she wrote a book about baking as biography. And during COVID, I decided I was going to do that too. So I wrote Genealogy and Gastronomy, a family study in recipes. And I did a genealogy of my family. And actually the story is that I was cleaning the house, and my mother-in-law lived with us for several years, and she was a baker. And I was cleaning the house and decluttering, and I opened up the closet, and there's a plastic bag full of recipe cards. And I thought, oh, these are not to be kept. And then I began to look through them, and there were things like Aunt Letty's sugar cookies, and somebody else's wedding cakes. And I realized that those were really people in my husband's family. So I ended up doing a genealogy of that family and then my family too. And I questioned my mother about recipes. And so for a COVID project for my children, I gave them a cookbook of their family genealogy plus the recipes that I'd found in this bag. So that's another way you can view your family history. And I had lots to look at it. But I copied it and sent it to all the nieces and nephews, and so everybody has the McHale McKeeby family cookbook.
My dad did that with my mom's recipes.
That's cool.
So, yeah, once you start reading them, you go, oh, the Irish soda bread.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing. So I don't know if they appreciate it, but I had a good time doing it, and I had a lot of time during COVID. So anyway, that's another way you can tell a family story. Another way is diaries. If you're fortunate enough to find a family diary, and actually this is my great-grandmother's diary, I've been transcribing it. I found it in my grandmother's stuff, and I thought it was just a book, and I began to look at it, and it's a diary. So it's really fun. It's 1918, so it's 1 year in the life of my great-grandmother, and I think diaries are really are an important way you can also record and collect your family history. And this is fun. It says Easter Sunday and all the clocks must be turned back 1 hour by order of the government. So it's when daylight savings time came, she's got it backwards because it's spring. They should be spinning ahead. But, and the other one I liked is this Saw the Aeroplane. And it was a big deal in 1918, and I looked up the newspaper, and it did say this demonstration female pilot had been flying from Chicago to New York City and got caught in a big storm near Binghamton and went down. And my great-grandmother was in the Binghamton area. So it's kind of fun to see how somebody experiences history. And if you have the luck to have a diary, it's really fun to look at. So that's it about family interviewing. Anybody have questions or anybody thinking here that they might want to do some interviewing of family, collecting stories over the Thanksgiving holiday?
We always do.
Okay.
I mean, we not necessarily record it, but we always talk stories every time the family gets together.
That's great.
It's fun, yeah.
That's great. Do you ever write them down?
No.
No, yeah. think about writing them down. So, yeah.
So our mother wrote daily diaries at the end of the day, just similar to what your grandmother did. And we have books, and we have bags of these.
Well, that's great.
And I guess the challenge is, what do we really do with them, and so that we can preserve them?
Yes, that's a great thing to have. Sometimes the diaries only say, 7 o'clock. It was 25 degrees today. Yeah, so they give you the weather too. Yes.
I gave all my former husbands, all his, to the archives, and they keep it forever.
That's a great thing. Yeah, I mean, as you said, and as you said, what do you do with them? Archives, you don't know 50, 75 years from now how somebody might use that. The information that's in there may look, pretty basic, but there might be a use for somebody. Yeah. And again, what I cleaned up, or if I get back to that. No, we can't. Okay, go backwards. What I had was pretty, what I showed you was like long sessions that she did. Most of the time it was churn 4 pounds of butter today. But that's a real interesting thing to think about in 1918. You're still churning milk into butter, or cream into butter, and so I'm sort of looking at it as the transition from farm life to industrial life. And I did that for Esther. If you know this book, The Farm to Village Boyhood, all about the transition of Esperance from a farming community to one that was more of a suburban, ex-urban, connections to more of an urban setting. So again, those diaries, you never know who might find some interest in them. So yeah, finding an archive or the Historical Society here, I would assume Duanesburg would, if they're from here, would take them. Are yours in, what archive are they in?
Fonda,
Okay.
they have a really good archive.
They do.
And they put everything that's way.
They do, yeah. And if you don't want to give the originals, if you take pictures of them, scan them, they won't like it as much. Or maybe you keep the scanned and give them the original, but because the archives like the originals. But at least the information's there. So, yes.
Speaking of diaries, the Fiddlers seem to be good diary writers from the look at. But I had one of my grandmother wrote to my uncle who had moved to Idaho, back in the teens. So she wanted to make a recording for him, but ended up giving me the diary. And he didn't want it, I guess. But in there she tells, word for word, the sinking at Titanic.
Oh, that's wow. That's
It's
great.
amazing to read that. And her handwriting, The other thing was they built the house on Weaver Road in 1910, 11, 12. She writes everything what it cost to build that place. Who laid the stone basement and all that.
That's great.
It's wonderful to read.
That's great. There are lots of information that's embedded in that kind of stuff. Yeah. Great to have. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things, this is taking a little darker turn than this whole thing, this is uplifting, I've been thinking about my kids having to write my obituary, and how much do they know about my life? And we haven't really. It's not that we don't talk about things, but they haven't interviewed me about things that they might not know about my work or whatever that might go into an obituary. And so I decided, well, I'll put it down. I won't say what a great guy he was. But anyway, I give him the bare bones of it. But there are lots of times when you might have to write an obituary about somebody who may be close or may not, who you don't know that well. And then you think about that, you might want to interview them beforehand about some things that they would like. to go into that. Of course, that might be a touchy thing to do. But.
Sure. Well, that's what the press does. A lot of times they interview people that they know or they don't want to be noticed after they pass. And they keep those archived so they can, it is basically interviewing so that they can do the obituary. But it's good you writing things down. I mean, that's the story. StoryCorps. It's an NPR. They play it on NPR. They were setting up recording booths around the U.S. And it used to be they had a StoryCorps bus. I don't think they do that anymore. But they would go to different communities, and you could go in and you bring somebody with you, and then you would have this opportunity to interview somebody, and that they would record it for you. And all those recordings are archived at the Library of Congress. And what you hear on the radio is just really edited down to a soundbite. But StoryCorps, if you're interested, you can go online and request a recording package, and they will send you a how to do it sheet, and I think they even provide some of the equipment, and then you can do that as a family exercise if you want to try it and have some more other support by a professional company that they'll do that. I don't know how much it costs, but they have that service. But it's good to write it down. If you don't have anybody to interview, I'm sure you all know there's occasions when you think, oh, I wish I had asked that person about that, or I wish I'd had that story written down. I certainly have those moments when I say, oh, I waited too long. I should have asked that 10 years earlier. So those are all moments you regret. And, to be honest with you, those are always going to be there. There's always the question or the interview that you should have done. I feel that all the time as someone who interviews all the time. Oh, I just came a little too late. So grab it when you can. So I'll just briefly talk about New York Folklore because that's what I do, and then I'll be finished. But so we provide technical assistance. Something like today was really for you, technical assistance, how to do this. Interviewing, we provide it to community organizations and to artists. We work with artists around New York State. Oops. Why is it just not looking on? It said I waited too long. There you go. We have a gallery on J Street in Schenectady that we show art from different communities around the state. We have an exhibit now that's Mexican Day of the Dead. In another couple of weeks, we'll have paper cuts from the Chinese tradition and the Jewish tradition of paper cutting. So we'll have two sort of different traditions that are similar. We do a lot of arts education. We bring artists into the schools. We partner with a group called Local Learning. It's a national organization. We also have a program right now in the Schenectady School District. So we work with a lot of children and try to introduce them to cultural traditions that are not their own. We do public presentations. We do workshops and classes. This is one we just had. We had an exhibit on the hat making of a woman who made hats from 1944 until 1970. Fancy hats that people wore to church. And it was up for 6 weeks or so, and we had some hat making workshops. And we included hip-hop artists from Schenectady working with teenagers. We also do documentation. So this is a project I did a couple years, actually, a couple different times. This was one exhibit. We did a whole exhibit on Irene and the impacts on Rotterdam Junction. This is the Rotterdam Junction exhibit, all based on oral history interviews from people who experienced Irene or who gave out help to people who were displaced by Irene. And then we did a second exhibit for the anniversary of Irene in 2021. And that was more focused on Schoharie and this region. So for several years I've been interviewing about the effects of Irene as a local history exercise. Right now we're involved in a place marking project. We have a grant from the Department of Environmental Conservation to mark places of significance on waterways in New York State that have to do with indigenous history. We have a project at Salamanca on the Seneca Nation right now with an artist who's Seneca, and we'll be starting to work on the Mohawk and the Schoharie this year. And so we're talking to Native elders, and they're saying where the places of importance are, and we'll be working with an artist to create markers, and you'll be able to use it as you can see the markers, you'll be able to hear the story that goes along with it when it's all done. And finally, the last thing I want to just say is we have a partnership with the Schenectady School District. This is kind of a fun project. It wasn't my idea. It was actually Veena Chandra's idea, who's the sitar player, and she wanted to do a whole program of a year-long exposure of kids to North Indian classical music in the Schenectady School District. And I don't know if you know Schenectady at all, but there's a large Guyanese population in Schenectady, and Guyana was colonized by the British. And when the British colonized Guyana, they brought over enslaved peoples from India to work in the plantations in Guyana. And so they were Indian, and then 200 years later, they still, as a group of people, are still kept keeping some of those Indian traditions, but they've also mixed with African traditions, with native Guyanese traditions that are coming from indigenous peoples. So it's a real interesting blend of culture. So we're bringing North Indian music into the schools, but we're also bringing Guyanese cultural traditions. We're trying to explore the connections and where things reared away over 200 years. So kind of a history project, but also much more about cultural expressions and getting kids to understand their roots, where they're from. So that's New York folklore. And I think that's it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
You had a question?
Yeah, well, comment. Another angle to this would be utilizing Ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
My brother has been doing ancestry work for years, and what he has encouraged the family to do is to submit short stories, poetry, whatever had to do with the family, and get it posted on there, because it's a great place for sharing for future generations or even current generations, because he has unearthed a lot of cousins and distant relatives, and it's fascinating.
That's great. And they do have a gallery. I do Ancestry too, so they have a gallery. You can upload pictures and
Yes.
And as you said, poetry and things that make that connection. Yeah, it is a great resource. Yeah. So, and it's not just genealogy. I mean, genealogy is important, but to me, it's the pieces of your family that come out in other ways that I get interested in. So, thank you.
Sure. Thank you again.